also notice is that our programs, and it's not our fault, but it tends to be our fault, tends to spend a lot of time worrying about rotator cuff strength. Rotator cuff strength is important, but really, I can get the rotator cuff as strong as possible. If the torso, hips, and legs don't work as a unit, I will tear that rotator cuff up again. We see almost all the time in our failures that we've had kids come in and have Tommy John surgery. They go through our awesome cuff program and return to throwing program, and during that time, they come back within 6 months with a rotator cuff issue. I mean, what did we do? We just transferred the problem or the load one step closer and actually created a new problem for these kids, because during our process, we really did not look at the total picture. Program that we've developed here, and honestly it's been developed from the standpoint of looking at how do we make a better athlete and what parts of making a better athlete transfer into baseball, into the overhead athlete. And I'm talking about baseball now, but to be honest with you, we're now seeing this in softball because some changes have happened in their game where the mound has been moved back and these girls are now having to throw the ball harder, but also they're having to spin the ball and do things they did not do in the past, because in the past they could just power through. So we're seeing our first Tommy Johns and cuff repairs coming out of softball, which we never saw before. With all that being said, when we look at our program, and honestly we call it the overhead athlete program, is that number one, when we talk to parents, coaches, and all the people in the public, we talk to them about how we can increase velocity safely, how we can increase performance safely. Within the clinical model, we know we're actually creating a healthier arm and an athlete that has less chance of injury. Also, coming off of an injury, we use the same program to prevent that athlete from having a recurrence of either their original or their primary diagnosis, or having, for some reason, an episode that causes a secondary diagnosis like rotator cuff tendinopathy, slap lesions, any of those things that we see in our kids who have an elbow surgery that may end up with a shoulder surgery. With that being said, our program actually robs from some concepts that are European. When we spent our time with Dr. Yanda in the Czech Republic, we talked about phasic chains and also anti-gravity muscles and the posterior chain, or however you want to call it. But we're finding that there are certain sets of muscles that tend to be indicative of a weak core and a weak hip activation program. That's going to be glute med. That's going to be any of the abductors of the hip. We also have muscles that we tend to see that become tight that are also indicative of a poor kinetic chain, and that would be the groin adductors, the hip flexors, pec minor, all those different muscles. Our program tends to uptrain the muscles that we tend to grow weak with repetitive activity, also increasing plyometric response from the lower extremity. Also, you can core activation first as our primary goal, that then leads to scapular stabilization and that strong scapular plane. And at the bell shape, the end of our curve, we then worry about rotator cuff activation.